welcome to the first episode of The Awakening of a Third World War. We have two shaping alliances: the Western Republics Treaty Organization, which is basically the Unionists, influenced by President Trump. And we've got the Confederacy of Independent States, which are the Separatists, led under Putin. We've got minor political organisations of those that are non-aligned or pirate states, and others that want to preserve their neutrality and independence under the Confederacy of Neutral Nations. We have an emerging Second Cold War between 2008 and 2029 between the West and the East. The world is rather divided during this time. The international banking crisis has occurred. The West sees rising inflation and debts, while Russia and China collaborate and are able to solidify the economy, becoming new economic and military threats to the United States. So, combined armed forces of the West is 4.9 million troops, 14.7 thousand tanks, 2.63 thousand planes, and 1.98 thousand warships during a peacetime status. The major contributors are South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia, Britain, France, Germany, Poland, partially Turkey, Canada, and the United States, while the Confederacy has a combined armed forces of 5.4 million troops, larger than the Republic so far, have 24,000 tanks, 9.8 thousand planes, and 1,050 warships. During a deterrent status, they are a rising military power, and the major contributors are Yemen, Belarus, North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia. We have many new conflicts occurring across the world: in the Middle East, in Asia, in Europe due to the war in Ukraine, in Africa, and in Latin America. We have the war for Ukraine continuing since 2022 until this point. The Russians are slowly advancing into Ukraine with the help of Belarus. There are also Transnistrian rebels arising in Moldova, which by this time, later this year, Russia will be supporting as Ukraine eventually begins to crumble against their forces and everlasting manpower. We have the Bern banking crisis in Switzerland, where the Russian investors say that the UBS is full of crooks that take advantage of the world's inflation. Perhaps a reform should be put in hand, but the Swiss bankers insist that, unlike with the Western world, you fail to repay your loans in time, and so that makes our business insoluble. War in the Balkans is beginning, as Serbia, influenced by Russia, wants to take the neutral nations in these territories and unite old territories of Yugoslavia. There's limited resistance against Serbia, as many support this movement, as they detest NATO for the previous bombings of Yugoslavia in the past. Kiev, by the end of this year, would be surrounded by Russian forces, and Ukraine sees limited aid as NATO is straining their resources. These territories would fall under Serbia, and Hungary would see resistance against NATO and support Russia. The Bern banking crisis escalates when Russian infiltrators attack US units in the region, believing that they were interfering with neutral talks. So they believe that taking over the banks will do them much better and ensure they don't have to pay the debts they were due to the war in Ukraine. After this crisis, and the United States helping the bank troops to repel the Russians, they say that cooperation with the West is most profitable, and so they call to expel all Russian investors from any treaties with us. Which is a crucial moment for the Republic and the Confederacy, as the Republic is able to have even greater financial links with the UBS in Switzerland, while the Confederacy loses a major investor in their future wars. How the Ukraine eventually falls, and a buffer zone is created, and a Slavic Federation is created. We also have situations occurring in the Congo regions, where the communist or fascist country of DR of the Congo wants to rebuild its old Congo Empire, which eventually happens due to limited support for the Republic of the Congo. And in the Middle East, things are getting with greater tension, as Israel is able to secure Palestine and has now decided to move into Jordan, beginning the next phase of the Netanyahu wars and creating a Netanyahic Judea. They begin their advance by late 2026. But the Alliance of Sovereign Arab Nations believe that Israeli attack should be no more and decide to unite against them and send overwhelming troops from Iran and other places against them. And eventually Israel is pushed back despite some US aid, but the war is very costly for the West, so they don't bother investing, not to mention the anti-war movements across the world against Israel. And eventually Jerusalem falls and is occupied by the Alliance. The West Bank Treaty sees Israel put under the Alliance of Sovereign Arab Nations, but other countries in the Middle East don't like this either, as now Israelis are being abused by the Palestinians, and they are also influenced by the West. And so we have a battle royale of the Middle East, not to mention the other Muslim nations joining the war. We have the Democratic Arab Party, influenced by the West. We've got the Alliance of Sovereign Arab Nations, to an extent supported by Russia and China. The combined armed forces of the DAP is 844,000 troops, 9,000 tanks, 3,434 planes, 294 warships, during a mobilization status not at its greatest extent. The implied nations is Saudi Arabia, Oman, Syria, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Egypt. There's also some aid from the United States and NATO, and we've got Israeli insurgents supporting them. For the Alliance of the Arab Nations, however, they have a far greater combined armed forces of 4.179 million troops, 6.5 thousand tanks, 3,000 planes, and 450 warships during a wartime status. But it means they won't be able to recruit any more soldiers, unlike the DAP. The implied nations is Iraq, Iran, Palestine, Lebanon, and Yemen. Besides supporting nations, which are trying to keep neutrality but still deciding which side they should join, is Turkey, Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Pakistan, China, and Russia. And more like they are rather hesitant to join because simply the Middle East is a mess. And so the war here is basically for naval dominance, minerals and other resources, and geographical/strategic locations. The Second Arab Civil War begins, and there are clashes all across the region. We've got the US trying to reinforce its financial state of Djibouti, while Somalian pirates and Houthis militia try to raid them. But Saudi Arabia and other pro-Western Muslims try to support the US enforcement. We've got a major assault against occupied Israel, trying to liberate the Israelis from the Palestinians. We also have another offensive into Iraq, trying to seize the oil fields they are and help the war efforts of the West. Russia begins their invasion of Georgia quite quickly as the alliance begins their attack too. We've got the Africa Corps from the other Muslim regions in Africa launching their assault into Egypt, trying to take over the Suez Canal, but the US is able to send their forces and halt their advance. The US sends in many planes to bomb them, approximately 800,000 tons during the entire war. And eventually the Houthis militia in Yemen fall, and the Somalian pirates are caught off guard. Eventually Israel is liberated, and the oil fields in Iraq are secured under the West, and soon we'll see American traders. While also Georgia and Armenia are split between Russia and the Alliance. And the assault into Egypt to disrupt the Suez Canal was a failure. And now we've got the final phase of the Second Arab Civil War. We've got the Slavic Federation, the Alliance of Sovereign Arab Nations, and the Democratic Arab Party against each other in a three-way war, as Turkey does not want any side to take over the Dardanelles, so the West and the separatists will temporarily join forces and march into Turkey and take over the Dardanelles. In the Black Sea near Istanbul, we've got a Turkish fleet in the region, while a Russian fleet arrives, but not any fleet. It's a new large dreadnought under Russia that has been built in secret. Nobody knows about it yet. The Turkish called it the Shadows of the Tides. It ejects a disruptor beam into the Turkish fleet and disables all of the technology, and the shadow of a Russian ship bombards the entire Turkish fleet as Russian reinforcements come to eliminate the stragglers. And the shadow is kept in secret for now. And then we've got the final offensive into Turkey. And Istanbul is secured under the separatists first, allowing them to take over Dardanelles, and the former leader of the Alliance of Sovereign Arab Nations is now sympathetic to the separatists and states that it is high time we rid ourselves of Western imperial influence. A confederacy of independent states shall be made to counter the Republic, formalizing Putin's vision. Eventually Ankara is under siege by the neutral groups, However, the US does a retaliatory strike into Istanbul, believing the alliance to be alone, but figuring out that they bombed Slavic troops too, they theoretically declared war on the Confederacy. And now a major war is to begin. Turkey is in a civil war between the Western-supported Republic and the Confederate-supported Socialist States. War has been declared between the Western Republic's Treaty Organization and the Confederacy of Independent States. And here will begin the Third World War.